Rough City Podcast with Keith and Chaz, episode 4. I just got back from the new Joker movie.
Oh, you just saw it?
Just got back.
Oh, dude, that's great because I saw it yesterday.
Yeah. We're going to get back to that. This is obviously a music podcast.
Yeah.
Not necessarily a movie podcast, but that's going to come back in conversation. Let's just keep that handy for a minute here.
Sure.
Keith, I would like to talk about a music culture that I think is on its way out as we've known it.
Sure.
Film scores.
Mm-hmm.
And try to follow me here. Stay with me here.
Sure.
Can you name a film score composer that has done something that actually matters, that has been born in the last 50 years?
Well, I don't know how old Danny Elfman is, but
Definitely over 50.
At this point, yeah. But he seems like he might be one of the younger ones compared. I don't know what people use these days. I know that a lot of the old guys are still alive and they're still employed by a lot of these directors. But I don't know any of their names, to be honest.
All right. But I'm sure you know their work, whether you know their names or not. And this is where I'm going with this. So let's go ahead and, because you're right. They're still working, the ones that are still with us, because they're all pretty. Here's where I was going with this.
Mm-hmm.
We can't name a film score composer that's actually made anything that's really stood out, that's been born in the last 50 years, because there isn't one. And
it would seem so, yes.
Right. Let's go ahead and name them. Let's go ahead and name the top 10 greatest film score composers. I don't know if I can even name 10, and this is off the top of my head because I love film scores. Everyone does. It's really, how can you not? But this is where I'm going with this. So let's go ahead and start naming them. John Williams, obviously.
Yeah.
Alan Silvestri.
Okay.
James Horner.
Okay.
Jerry Goldsmith.
Okay.
James Newton Howard.
Okay.
Howard Shore.
Howard Shore.
Hans Zimmer.
Hans Zimmer.
Danny Elfman. Did I already say Danny Elfman?
Danny Elfman.
Now that's what? 8?
I think that's 8.
Okay, now that's all I can really name. I don't know I'm sure I'm leaving some out, certainly. But, this is what we're going to do. We're going to talk about this for a second, but I did look up the top 10 as far as what the internet considers best film score or movie soundtracks. We'll get into that too, but this is my point. These guys that I all just named, they're 50 or older, the ones that are still alive. A couple of them we've already lost. Jerry Goldsmith, he was older. He's gone. And James Horner, unfortunately, which I only recently kind of found out, he's one of my favorite film score composers of all time. He tragically died flying his own small aircraft into a mountain.
Oh, man.
He could still be with us. Dude, that guy did fucking... Let's go ahead and actually, let's do this. Let's give James Horner a worthy fucking shout out here because he is in my top. I have a top shelf of favorites, and this guy is certainly in there. So let's start, James. I'm going to just fire out James Horner's career, and he'd still be writing right now. But here we go. Starting from 1982, the year I was born. Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan. The best Star Trek film.
Huh.
Funny thing is, Jerry Goldsmith started the Star Trek thing in the movies because Jerry Goldsmith did Star Trek the motion picture theme. It's the most famous one. It's the one they still used for Star Trek The Next Generation. But that was actually Jerry Goldsmith that he wrote for the first Star Trek motion picture. For some reason, he wasn't available for part 2, so they got James Horner. This was his big break. and he did The Wrath of Khan. Totally different sounding, but you definitely got that outer space stuff from James Horner. So here we go. I'm going to go ahead and fire out James Horner's career. Check this out. Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, 48 hours. Krull. Remember Krull?
Never saw it.
Oh, God. It was an epic, like Conan the Barbarian, but budget. Anyway, okay. Brainstorm. Brainstorm. Amazing movie. Christopher Walken was super young. Here we go. I'm skipping a couple. I'm really getting the primaries here. Star Trek III, Search for Spock. Of course, they got him back. Cocoon. So this guy's been around for a while, bro. Since the 80s, since our childhood.
So wait, hold on. So in the Search for Spock, they got James Horner back.
Yeah. So basically, Jerry Goldsmith. Go ahead.
But did they get Spock back?
Yeah. Well, I'll hopefully be back in the sequel, Spaceballs 2, The Search for More Money.
That's one of my favorite lines in that movie.
All right. So here we go. So we're still in the 80s here. Cocoon.
Oh.
Next was his other next big break. Aliens.
Oh, the second one.
Second one.
Or was that the third one?
That's the second one.
Okay.
So let's see. Here, I'm still looking. Cocoon, The Return. The Land Before Time, baby.
Wow.
Scored our childhood, bro. Dude, Field of Dreams. One of his best scores. The piano, the subtle piano. Oh, my God, dude. Okay, here, I'm continuing on. Honey, I Shrunk the Kids.
Oh, my God. I can hold on a minute because that movie was a big deal when I was a kid.
Fuck yeah.
And that, yeah. So I got all those emotions from watching that movie and listening to that soundtrack.
When Auntie died.
And that was James Horner. I didn't know that.
There you go. I'm telling you, man, he's been with us, and we didn't know it. Okay, Glory. Another 48 hours. The Rocketeer. I remember that theme, dude. I remember that theme.
Yeah.
Dude, it was a major thing. Oh, the trumpet. Yeah. James Horner was always with us. Okay, let's keep going. Patriot Games.
Okay.
Let's see. It's about to get good, bro. So let's see. The Pelican Brief. Clear and Present Danger. Okay, here we go. Well, first of all, Casper. And that's also, dude, silly movies. Great film score. If you go back, the piano. Dun, 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 dun. So sad. It's the saddest thing I ever heard on piano. And he made this silly movie make you actually fucking feel some shit.
That's the mark of a good film score composer is supposed to amplify the emotion of the scene, and that sounds like exactly what he did.
James Horner was the master. Okay, here we go. Apollo 13, Jumanji, and now here's the big tamale. Braveheart.
Oh,
Braveheart.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Major league right there.
He was all over the 90s.
He didn't do Major League, the movie. I'm just saying he was major. I think that was there's definitely somebody, though. All right. The Mask of Zorro. Yeah, fantastic. Titanic, of course, because, Cameron's going to get him back after Aliens.
Except for the part where it was
Celine Dion.
Celine.
He scored her bullshit. Okay, let's keep looking. Yeah, oh, definitely. Bicentennial Man, that wasn't. I'm sorry I even said that. American Tail. An American Tail.
I'd like to see the Armenian version of that, an Armenian Tale.
Why? Did that just go over my head completely?
Because it's a small country and not a lot of people know about it. I think it has a tale to tell. But you know who we can get to do it?
Not James Horner, because he's dead on a mountain.
Well, what do you think about Randy Newman? Okay, go on.
he's actually he's done some badass film scores. Actually, if he just doesn't sing, his actual music is good, and his brother is even better. His brother actually, I think it's Paul Newman, if I'm not mistaken. I have Google right in front of me. I should look at it, but his brother does excellent film scores too. Anyway, we're getting off track. You just said Randy Newman, and it totally derailed me. We were talking about James Horner. And you dared. All right. So anyway, that's James Horner. He's one of my favorites. So I just wanted to give him a worthy mention. But the point that I was making is these guys that are alive, they're going to be dead soon. Let's be real.
Yeah.
And when they're dead and gone,
yeah,
never be another group like this.
Well, that's the thing is that you make an interesting point because the film industry, all of the big production companies and big time directors for decades, they've been using or they've been employing this handful of composers, most of which you've already named. And when those people go away, that whole style of, it almost seems like, I mean, people will, the torch will be passed to younger composers, sure. But the impact and the style that these, the 8 people that we mentioned, that is going to fade. I believe it might fade away because unless we get some more young people that really are talented and follow in the footsteps of people like James Horner and John Williams and all those guys.
You're getting me exactly. You're getting my point exactly. And this is an observation I've been thinking about for it's almost like we lived that golden age where you're never going to see the likes of this kind of, a splash in a culture like these guys but there's a reason for all of this. It's a per capita type thing. I don't know if that's probably not the right phrase, but you get me where it's like in that time, there was only so many movies. There was only a few movies. I mean, considering Jaws really set it off. Before Jaws, you had the classic era. Classic movies like Psycho, Hitchcock. Kubrick's the only wild card who actually lasted through that era and into modern. He was a freak. But other than that, you had a dying era, and then you got into the Spielberg era, which we're still in. We're still in it. He that blockbuster thing and the film score coming through. So there was only so many blockbusters, even in the 80s. But you're right. The big cats, the heavy cats like Spielberg and this and that, Cameron would always get this guy. Tim Burton would always get Danny Elfman. Spielberg would always get John Williams. That kind of thing. And that will bring us... Sorry?
Oh, I was just going to say that it's actually common in the industry that directors, if they have a good relationship, like a good working relationship, and they really like the composer, they'll keep them in their, on their short list.
Yeah, but here's the thing. On one hand, I want to say it's just because there was only a few movies and movie makers at the time. So that doesn't necessarily mean there wasn't people out there by the droves that he could have hired to make music. But on the other hand, I got to say, but hold on, because here now we have movies coming out in droves, like all these Avengers movies or whatever, fantastic movies with fantastic scores. But does anything stand out to you like the masters in the back of the day, the Back to the Futures, the Indiana Joneses, those kind of themes? Does anything cut you to the core? No, it's almost like, yes, it's going to be a good Hollywood film. So yes, the film score will be polished and perfect. You know why it doesn't matter? Because the musician's always the person you pay last. Well, it's always secondary, but those guys were great for a reason.
I think the other thing is this, though, like the music is still important in a movie, even in a movie like The Avengers or Endgame. But the thing is that
it's an excellent score every time.
Well, here's the thing: is that if you look at any movie that was made in the last, I don't know, it doesn't seem like any of them are memorable, and I feel like I don't want to say it's a lack of creativity because you never really know. I mean, the composer might be working really hard at doing these things, but it's just these guys that were alive in the 70s, 80s, and 90s and early 2000s. The guys that we grew up with, they were an extraordinary bunch of composers that really did seem to have a big impact on the movies of that time. And you just don't feel none of the music is memorable, like you said, in any of the modern movies. I can't think of any particular theme, melodic theme in any of the Avengers or any of the Marvel movies, for example. So you're right. I mean, it's like when these people pass away, when John Williams and all these other people in the next, who knows, 10, 20 years or, whatever, then yeah, it does kind of feel like we're going to lose that magic music because those composers will no longer be with us. But, you never really know. Like I said, talent comes in little bursts and sometimes it comes out of nowhere. And I'm hopeful that there will be composers out there in the future that will carry the torch and have their own creative ideas to not only enhance movie-going experiences, but have memorable. See, that's the thing, is that these guys like John Williams and James Newton Howard and all these guys, they not only were let's talk about John Williams for a minute. Are you still there?
Right. Yeah.
Let's talk about John Williams for a minute. Like a lot of these composers, the big eight that you mentioned, they had a lot of amazing film scores and beautiful music going on to back these scenes. But in my mind, the one guy that really stands out is John Williams, and it's because his themes are so catchy and memorable, and he's done so many of them that like everybody, like I can't think of another composer where everybody knows that composer's theme. There's
Right.
Danny Elfman, like as an example, like Danny Elfman has The Simpsons, sure, but John Williams has like Star Wars and Indiana Jones and did he do Back to the Future?
No, but fucking Superman.
Superman. Well, there you go. So Indiana Jones, Star Wars, and Superman.
Those are big tamales.
These are melodic themes that literally everybody knows and can hum or sing. I mean, that is a big impact, and I can't think of any composer nowadays that has that kind of impact on a society.
Right. You know what it might be, dude? You know what it might be? It might be because so many composers work so hard to get their shot, and they get to work with the London Philharmonic and record a film score, but it all becomes so goddamn surgical and broken down by producers and everyone else who's got the money, who's in charge, who don't have the courage to take the risk to let another artist just take it from there, like Spielberg did with Williams and Lucas did with Williams and all of this faith that was thrown in of a collaboration. The word collaboration is almost ridiculous to even say in Hollywood these days. So therefore, you're not getting any brave melodies. You're getting careful and correct melodies via Avengers movies. Like, okay, that's the right beat. They call them beats, and it makes me sick. Like hearing, because I watch a lot of director commentaries or documentaries and shit. I love it, and hearing producers going, "Yeah, I tell the composer we need a beat right there." That tells you you're sad. We need a beat right here. Shut the fucking. Let the man look at the images and do this. But also, John Williams and all those other greats are coming out of an era where people used to also still read books. Just like the movie makers. And that shit, that's a whole huge evolutionary leap. Because when people, all they had were books, there was so much more feeling and emotion in there that went to the screen from the beginning of motion pictures up until the 80s and even 90s. that shit is starting to die, and it's all becoming oversaturated, and it's becoming, you're basically looking at the movie poster brought to life, this crisp, perfect package, and
Yeah.
you're losing that shit that's internal, that we would trust each other, of storytellers. I don't know. We're going on a big rant. Let's just get
Well,
into
you
it.
know what? Well, hold on a
Go ahead.
minute. Hold on a minute.
Go
I
ahead.
do have a couple things to say, which is there's another theory, which is that, well, it's not really a theory. I mean, it's kind of the way things are. You know, nowadays, so people like John Williams and Danny Elfman and James Newton Howard and all those guys. What was that guy you were?
James Horner?
Yeah, James Horner. All these composers. You know, one thing that's I think is good to remember is that these people, you know, their careers spanned, you know, like I said, the 70s, 80s, and the 90s, right? And they're older guys.
Right.
So these guys were born in like the 50s or the 40s, and they grew up in a different era where they were more exposed to classical music.
That's right.
I'm looking at John Williams right now, and as an example. So like John Williams is his big influences as a composer, and people compare him to a lot of
Brahms, big time
Well,
Brahms. I'm sorry to cut you off, but I never knew before, and I always wondered because he only sounded like him. But here, my dad showed me old school Brahms, and man, it's like that's where he came from. But go ahead.
well, a lot of guys, like I'm seeing here that Wagner and Tchaikovsky, Holst and Stravinsky actually were had big impacts on it seems on John Williams's, you know, composition.
Oh yeah,
So these guys grew up in an era where like classical music was a little bit more. It was something that was more. I don't want to say cherished, for lack of a better word, you know, amongst the music community.
it was.
Like nowadays, I don't know what modern film score composers listen to these days. They probably listen to the old stuff, but these guys really, like, during their formative years, they learned the tricks from people like Wagner and Tchaikovsky and Brahms.
Yeah,
And these guys, and you know, those old school composers those are the greats. Those are the guys that literally invented this style of music. And I feel like nowadays classical music doesn't. It seems to be going the way of jazz, which is like this kind of a dying art, you know, and it doesn't seem to be very important to the critical mass. And I think that's going to have an impact on future film scores, because that's why these guys, what I'm getting at here is that's why these composers that you mentioned are so great, is because they recognized and took inspiration from the great composers of the 17 and 1800s, you know?
you're right. And the new guys basically are drawing from film scores, and that's slightly hollow, or you know what I mean, or it's not encapsulating everything. The reason symphonic music works so well in movies is because that will make it timeless. As soon as you put music of the era, you make it there. It's 80s forever. Blade Runner, great example.
Oh yeah.
So you put
No, go ahead.
you put symphonic music, it's timeless. You can't pinpoint what era, and it's epic. It's storytelling.
Well, it's just something about strings and horns. The richness of those tones, people respond to those things emotionally, particularly when they're set against an emotional scene in a movie.
Right.
You know, it's not like, it is kind of funny when you are like, I'm kind of going off what you said a minute ago. Like when you see movies where there's like rock songs happening, or like, you know, some 80s shit going on.
Or like a Scorsese movie. excellent soundtracks every movie, but he's capturing a mood with mostly old-timey songs.
Yes, yes, and that that's a cool style for certain types of movies, but for movies on the scale of like I don't know what the word is. I mean, big movies that affected culture a lot, like Star Wars and Indiana Jones and whatever else. The most effective music is classical music or string music or the type of music that you hear in film scores for usually dramatic types of movies.
Before we move on, it's kind of cool how John Williams where he got his mojo is his first work as a film score composer was doing battle action music for black and white old plane dogfighting movies.
Really?
Then his next big gig was doing the music for the hit TV show Lost in Space in the 60s. So so combine the two. You got dogfighting with Lost in Space, bam, you got Star Wars.
Yeah.
So that's where that came from.
Did you see, I hate to, I almost don't want to do this, but I think it's kind of interesting. Have you ever seen the YouTube video where some music fan actually puts a big bunch of a big bunch of John Williams' most memorable themes, and he puts them next to certain classical pieces like Satie or Wagner or Tchaikovsky, and you can obviously hear the influence. And that's what I was getting at earlier, is that John Williams took inspiration, all of the most famous memorable themes that you can think that he's done were a lot of them were direct quotes from these old composers. It's really, really interesting.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, look, let's just go ahead and jump into this.
Okay.
Top 5 film scores. What are your top 5 favorite film scores and movie soundtracks? And I'll give mine. Then we'll just check out what the internet calls the top 10 of all time film scores, just for the sake of it. So go ahead. If you can name your top 5.
I'm going to go by the ones that the ones that I remember are the ones that had the biggest impact. So I'm going to go by the ones that I remember, which are going to be Star Wars, Indiana Jones, Back to the Future, probably Jurassic Park.
Yeah,
and
good
then,
one.
God, the 5th one, what else was a big deal for me? I don't know. I don't really know. Those are my 4 for now.
All right. Those are fucking great, dude. Mine are similar. All right. So I got Forrest Gump, E.T. And I've always said this, man. E.T., if I were a music teacher, the last day of school, I would play the movie E.T. just for music appreciation. Just kids, I want you to look at what do the scenes look like? Aren't those sounds making you feel exactly what you're looking at? It's he was the master at that. He could make you feel, in E.T., John Williams could show you what flashlights sound like.
Yeah.
All right, so Forrest Gump, E.T., Star Trek the Motion Picture, and Next Generation, I have to say, because that's just such a prominent melody. Braveheart, King Kong. Now, here's the thing about King Kong, and this is, I think, my favorite film score of all time. And it's, I think, underrated. People don't really pay much attention to it. I'm talking about the Peter Jackson, the remake King Kong, the recent one.
Okay.
James Newton Howard. And let's talk about him. I've got to talk about him for a second. because he seems to go under the radar from these other greats, but he's also been with us. He's been with us a long, long time. I'm going to just go ahead and fire out his career really fast, just to trip you out. How long James Newton Howard was my top favorite film score composer. How long he's been with us. So let's go ahead and start. Wildcats, 1986. I loved that movie. That was with Goldie Hawn, Wesley Snipes, Woody Harrelson's football movie. I loved it when I was in the 80s.
I never saw it, actually.
All right, we're going to keep going. Taps. Major League. I told you we were going to get back to that.
That's funny.
Okay. The Prince of Tides. Pretty Woman. These are all classics. Alive. Falling Down.
Oh.
All right. Major League 2. Outbreak. See, he was kind of the action movie guy. But then something happened later on in the 90s. We're going to get to that. Where he changed and he became something so much more. Okay. Outbreak. Wyatt Earp, which was the bullshit compared to Tombstone, everyone knows. Let's see. Space Jam. That's a worthy mention. It was part of our childhood. Dante's Peak. Liar, Liar.
Oh.
The Devil's Advocate.
Oh.
Waterworld.
I remember that movie.
Fuck yeah, you do. Postman, basically the same movie on land with an envelope. Runaway Bride, Stir of Echoes, The Sixth Sense. Okay, here we go. Here is the game changer. Now, no one really knows this, or they know it, but I don't think a lot of people don't pay attention to this. M. Night Shyamalan, just like other great directors who had their guy, M. Night Shyamalan's guy was James Newton Howard. And if you go back and watch any of his good movies, because he's had some really bad ones, but he's had some awesome ones. I really, Sixth Sense, of course, set it off. Go back and watch that movie. Listen to that music. It's fucking unbelievable. The score for Sixth Sense is gorgeous. Then you got Unbreakable, another fan-fucking-tastic score, which came back in Split and Glass. Same themes, that Unbreakable theme. The Village. Not the greatest movie, but the film score is goddamn. James Newton Howard is a master. Lady in the Water. Didn't get great reviews, but the very storybook vibe and the piano, gorgeous film score. Signs with Mel Gibson and Joaquin Phoenix. Beautiful film score. Go back and watch that just for the score, and it will move you to tears. James Newton Howard is the one film score composer. Because look, I love listening to film scores, but I feel it's kind of silly if I have a mix CD with Back to the Future blaring, jamming in my car. It doesn't really. But James Newton Howard, I can listen to these movie scores and be moved very emotionally. He is the all built up to when Peter Jackson finally hired him for King Kong. You go and watch that movie again. Yes, it's a movie about a giant gorilla. The music is an absolute emotional fucking crescendo of every level. From the action to the somber parts, it is a fucking masterpiece. I can't recommend it enough. Just listen to the soundtrack King Kong and forget what it's a score to. Forget what it's about. It's a beautiful movie, and it's a great tribute to the classic. But man, the music, I can't even express it. I could talk about the score for King Kong for an hour, but I'm not gonna. I just want to say James Newton Howard, he's been with us in our childhood. He's still around. He's my absolute favorite. So those are I got to give you an honorable mention here for my top 5 as far as soundtracks go. This doesn't mean film score, but actual movie soundtracks. And that is 3 mentions: Highlander, The Crow, Mortal Kombat.
Oh, okay.
Because the Highlander, first of all, let's do a quick thing about Queen for a second. Queen was the only band I can name that was ever commissioned to do full movie soundtracks. They did Flash Gordon and Highlander. Because remember the fucking score, the soundtrack for Highlander? Here we are. I am immortal. And then who wants to live forever? Like that shit is so epic in the middle of that movie. So They did the whole. I believe if Freddie Mercury lived, they may have kept that going. They may have been the band to hire for movie soundtracks, which is like their other thing. They are legendary because they are immortal. No pun intended. They're immortalized in Super Bowls forever.
That's right.
With "We Are the Champions," whoever wins the Super Bowl until time stops, "We Are the Champions" will be what's played, and We Will Rock You" is played in the stadium probably every game. So they got football stadiums and movie soundtracks, dude. They were one of a kind. Anyway,
they were good at writing music.
And The Crow, you remember that soundtrack?
I never saw The Crow.
Oh my god! Oh my god! I am canceling this podcast.
I'm sorry.
Guys, to our listeners, we've got a big band family meeting right now.
There's a lot of movies that I still need to see. You need to make me a list. You gotta make me a list.
That just hurt my Abdullah Oblonga. Okay, well, let me just explain. The Crow had an amazing soundtrack. It had Stone Temple Pilots, Nine Inch Nails, all that shit that we remember in the 90s from our fucking youth on the radio was on that movie. Anyway, God, I got to show you that. Anyway, Mortal Kombat, I know you saw that. Mortal Kombat, that had an amazing soundtrack. So anyway, that's our top 5. Let's go ahead and list what the internet considers the top 10 films of all time. Go ahead.
Gotta stop you there. I just thought of my 5th one. I gave you 4.
All right.
I thought of my 5th one. Okay, so it was Indiana Jones, Star Wars, Jurassic Park, Back to the Future.
Mouth of the mic. Is your mouth on the mic? Sorry.
Yes, I'm right here. Can you hear me?
Okay, I can hear you.
So it was Star Wars, Back to the Future, Jurassic Park, Star Wars. I already said Star Wars. What was the other one? Indiana Jones and Con Air.
Con Air.
Sick movie.
Oh, makes me sick. Yes. Oh my god, dude! Fucking Nicolas Cage. Nicolas Cage's Southern accent. I tried to watch the opening of that the other day, just to laugh at it. I couldn't even, man. I was so because the whole opening is him reading to his daughter, the narration, like, "Dear daughter, da 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 da." Oh my god, your words are like just fucking all right.
Yeah. All right.
Top 10 film scores of all time. This is via the internet. I got this off youdiscovermusic.com. So we'll start with number 10. This is what the internet lists. Number 10, Back to the Future. Number 9. Number 8, Jaws.
Jaws. Okay. Of course,
Number 8,
Jaws.
Of course. I always said, dude, this guy fucking got an Academy Award and a multi-million-dollar career off 2 notes. No, there's a lot more to it, actually. I just watched Jaws the other night. I wanted to show my niece because she's a huge film buff. We're both horror fanatics. And I'm like, look, this is Jaws. It was made in the 70s. Picture Jason Voorhees, but he's in the water and it's a shark. And she got it. All right, so here we go. Right. So number 10, Back to the Future. Number 9, Jaws. Number 8, Fellowship of the Ring.
Oh.
Number 7, Rocky. Definitely, dude. That shit. We all know the Rocky theme. That was American composer Bill Conti.
Oh, yeah, I know that theme. Yeah.
Of course you do. All right. Number 6, Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Ah.
Number 5, Casablanca. Max Steiner. Number 4, Gone. Go ahead.
That's one of those old movies that I need to see because it's one of those classics.
I never saw it either. Humphrey Bogart. It's apparently the greatest screenplay ever written, is what people say.
It's on my list.
All right. Number 4, Gone with the Wind.
Oh, I lost you.
Hello.
There you go.
Number 4, Gone with the Wind. I couldn't even hum that thing.
Lost you again. I'm sorry.
Come on. You hear me?
I do now.
All right, let's try this again. Hello?
Yes.
Okay. Gone with the Wind. I couldn't even hum that theme to you.
Yeah, I don't know either.
All right. Number 3. The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. That's fair.
Okay.
Ooh, ooh, ooh. Clint Eastwood.
That's
That's
right.
that theme. That's the Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. So we all know that. So that's number 3. Number 2, Godfather.
Oh, that's
All right. And number 1, Star Wars: A New Hope.
of course, because everybody can sing that, man. The whole world can sing that melody.
Exactly. All right. Well, that was fun. I'm keeping an eye on the clock here. Let's move on to the next bullet point that I've got, which is in the same vein as what we were just talking about. And here's a question I have for you, Keith Grimshaw.
What's my name?
Why are there no new instruments?
Well, there actually are new instruments. They're just
Hold on a minute. I'm not talking digital. I'm not talking this. I'm talking that. Let's just start with the basics. Let's think of the orchestra pit. This is something that really fucks with my head, and I don't like it. I'll tell you why I don't like it.
Okay.
It seems to me that back in the day when we discovered instruments, as a human race, we all collectively decided, let's make one instrument that handles each tone, each audible tone that human ear hears. So we started from the bass, created the whole body of sound up to the head and the high end, all the way up from the timpani to the piccolo. Okay? And I'm not going to, there's no point in fucking naming every goddamn instrument, but you know what I'm saying? We got the mids, we got the highs, we got the lows, we got the brass, we got the strings. Can you tell me why there's no new goddamn instrument? Did we really? Are you to sit here and tell me right now with a straight face? We as a human race figured it out. We got it right?
Well, what I'll tell you is this.
Because I don't like that.
The instruments, here's the thing, is that the instruments that you are familiar with, think of every instrument that you know, the ones that you're familiar with.
Right, and let me cut you off, not just for a brief second. First of all, you agree they cover everything from low to mid to soprano to tenor to all the above, but they also look nice. They look sort of flowery and swirly because it's all about image as well as audio since music has begun. So we've covered every tone and made them look nice. Continue.
Well, I disagree with that. It hasn't been about image the entire time. Not
Well, I mean, you got nice shiny brass, and you don't have to make a bass look like that. They made it look like a flower petal with little ribbons, little carvings.
Sure. I mean,
Elegant.
yeah, but if you go far back enough, the old prototypes of string instruments.
Okay, but I'm trying to say up until now. Please continue. I won't cut you off again.
So what I think is that the instruments that we're all familiar with nowadays, classical instruments used in jazz and rock music, which include blues and everything else, these instruments are the instruments that humanity has fallen in love with and enjoys the most. There were all sorts of instruments. You can think of the piano, for example. The piano is one of those universal instruments that almost every person loves to hear. Then you think about the organ or the what's the other name of that? The harpsichord, for example, or any of these other keyboard type instruments that people know about but are not used anymore because a smaller amount of people like the sounds of these instruments. The instruments that you can think of as of now, the most popular instruments are. The reason why these instruments are so prevalent in music and music history is because they produce the sounds that people like the most. instruments are being produced every year by engineers and musicians.
I disagree because I believe it's not a matter of us just choosing an instrument that because we like the way it particularly sounds. I think that the instruments are designed very specifically to be able to resonate a specific frequency so that you have your flutes over there, your cellos over there, your French horns over here. That way you've got your mids, your highs, everything that you need in the right place that has the right frequency. If you move your French horns to the front and your flutes in the back, you're going to fuck your mix up. This is before digital or any sort of recording. They created an actual artifact that does the mix for you. So the woodwinds are very specific. I don't think it's just about what's appealing to the ear. It was functional. It was actually practical. And that's what I think every orchestra pit instrument. Then you had the synthetic era where electronic instruments came into, and every electronic instrument, what they try to do is emulate what orchestra instruments do.
Well, you know
Therefore,
what you have.
Therefore, no digital thing has done anything new that the orchestra pit hasn't already done. My question remains, why are there no new frequency artifacts? And it freaks me out. This is why it freaks me out. I'm being fun, of course, but I feel like we really did get it right. There's only so many audio frequencies the human ear can attain on a sound wave on the air, and we figured it out. Therefore, the world's going to end soon because there's nothing else to fucking learn.
Well, you know what? I think you answered, to be honest, I think you answered your own question because the reason why you don't see any new instruments that make it in the mainstream of instruments that people use is a lot of it does have to do with practicality. They're just not practical.
Right.
They might cover certain frequencies, sure,
but not as well as what we've already made. Like a bass will not. You could make something that sounds different than a bass, but it's not going to do anything better than what the bass already does, like any other instrument in any other range. You get me?
Yes, but a lot of new instruments you see on YouTube, for example, that people engineer or build or create, they can be cumbersome, they can be awkward to play.
That's what we got it right.
Yeah, the instruments that humanity has invented in the last so many 100 years they're just the most practical instruments to use for what we want to hear. And we pretty much got it.
For what's possible.
Instruments.
I don't think it's just about what we want. I don't think it's about just what we want. I think it's literally we got the science down. A flute does that. Nothing else we design can get better than the frequency the piccolo can get. So same can be about the violin and the other mid-range instruments.
Yeah, there's still a lot of practicality and usefulness in these string instruments that you're mentioning.
And I'm sorry to go with your point. You're right. Some of it is tradition, and because that's where I think the elegance and the look of it comes into play. Because it looks nice, and you're like, you know what? Let's go with that because that's a thing of beauty. It all is kind of all in. What's the word? All in. Thank you. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, that's it. I thought you were saying something.
Oh, that's all. I interrupted you, but I was just saying. I think that's part of what you're saying. Some tradition. It's all encompassing what we like because it works and it also looks nice. It just gels and it's now tradition. Kind of the same thing.
Sure. I mean, yeah. There's also it's true. So there's a couple factors we need to consider here. There's practicality. There's the range that it covers, and then there's also what people like to hear and see. Let's take the guitar, for example. The guitar, there's lots of prototypes of guitars throughout human history.
Good point.
string instruments that resemble a guitar can go back, hundreds or thousands of years
Right.
into like the Middle East.
When
But the modern guitar,
he told us all about it. No.
yeah, well, the modern guitar that you see nowadays, at the time when it became popular, it was this instrument that first of all, had a wide range, so it covered that. It was practical to a certain degree because it was a compact instrument. You could carry it. It was easy to get around. It wasn't like a piano.
Right.
And thirdly, people liked the way it looked. Particularly when you get into the rock era, the blues and the rock era, and then when you get into the era of other people seeing what these instruments look like, it just had a cool look, and people loved the look and the sound of the guitar. And that's why the guitar is it's just one of the biggest, most popular instruments in the world, is because it covers all of those bases. It covers practicality, usefulness, the look, the range, everything.
That is a good point, because probably the most popular instrument before that was the piano, or organ, but you can't lug that anywhere. Which came first, the guitar or the piano? That's something to Google. I don't even know.
I really don't know, but I can tell you, I'm pretty sure that percussion came before anything else. If you go as far back as
I know that, but they're both considered percussion instruments, so it's hard to tell.
No, but I'm talking like percussion with hands or sticks.
I know. Drums are older than medicine, so drums were first.
Yeah.
All right. Well, you know what? Very interesting conversation. And if you're ready, I'd like to move on to the next bullet point, which is kind of part of the same thing.
Okay.
I might be getting a little too deep here on this episode, but fuck it. These are things on my mind. Here's another thought that I had. Try to stay with me here.
I'm here.
All right. Let's have a hypothetical scenario, because there's something that's bugging me, and I need someone to answer this for me. My question is, where is the connection? That's the question. Here's the hypothetical. Let's say we have a man who is the world's greatest violin maker. All right? Let's not even name him. Let's just call him the maker. Like a Stradivarius. Let's call this to some new guy, because this scenario I'm about to talk about can relate to any instrument. Any instrument.
Can we call him Glenn?
I don't want to call him Glenn. Let's listen to me for a minute. No. All right, let's call him Glenn. So here we have Glenn, who is a renowned great violin maker.
Okay.
Probably the greatest violin maker in the world. Now, let's say the day comes where he makes his greatest instrument, his greatest of his creations. He makes the world's greatest violin on this day. And if it's his greatest that he's ever made, and he's the world's greatest violin maker, then our Glenn here has just made the world's greatest violin, like a Hattori Hanzo.
Okay.
Could Glenn then sit down and play this violin like the world's greatest violin player?
No.
No. Then why? Why was he so fucking hyper-focused on creating this perfect... Now, let's reverse the roles for a minute before I finish. Let's reverse the roles. Let's find the world's greatest violin player. Let's call him Sven.
Sven and Glenn. Got it.
So Sven could play that motherfucker better than any chosen person on earth. Could Sven then, like Glenn, could he sit down and make the world's greatest violin?
The answer is no, and I can tell you why right now. Are you ready?
Oh, I'm ready.
So here's the thing. Sven is a lover of music, and Glenn is probably also a lover of music, but we're talking about different disciplines here. Glenn spent the majority of his life perfecting a skill in carpentry and building, whereas Sven, the musician, spent the majority of his life focusing on working and perfecting the art of music. It is very rare, unless you're somebody like, what's his name? Who's the guy that made the Michelangelo?
Gene Markley.
No. Who's the guy? Who's the one most famous inventor of all time?
Tesla.
No, the guy that made
Thomas Edison.
No, you got to go way further back than that. The one
Man, I don't. Fucking Benjamin Franklin.
who built.
You son of a bitch. Just move on. Oh, Michelangelo?
Yeah.
Michelangelo. He made David. His name is Michelangelo.
Fuck.
Leonardo da Vinci.
Leonardo da Vinci. That's what I'm talking about. God damn it.
We went through all 4 Ninja Turtles to make it to that motherfucker. All right,
so
go.
Listen, unless you're Leonardo da Vinci, which is an extremely rare person to be, the average human focuses on, or chooses to focus on one particular skill in life, right? So Glenn focused on carpentry his whole life, up to the point, and he honed that skill to the point where he could build something that he would consider to be perfect.
But
he did not spend an equal amount of time getting good at music. Now, Sven,
of course not. Of course
his
not.
entire life hold on.
I'm sorry.
Sven spent almost the majority of his life getting good at the art of music, and he didn't spend very much time building things.
Yeah, see, okay. I understand that, but I'm saying there is some imbalance here. When you talk about discipline, you use the word discipline. This is what Sven spent most of his time doing: drinking and banging chicks. Then the rest of his time, he got good at an instrument, which got him more chicks. So he is not disciplined. Then you have the architect, Glenn, who, dude, it's not like making a chair, or he would make chairs. For some reason, he has a passion. Dude, a violin, that's such a small little piece of wood that has to be so fucking precise. All right. So anyway, I think we're basically landing on the same thing. I have no real end to this. There's no point except to say I think there is something romantic in there somewhere, that the maker, has spent so much focus to make sure this thing is a craft so precisely and perfectly playable for the one meant to play it. And his reward is to sit down and hear Sven play. Whereas Sven doesn't give a fuck who makes this thing. He's hung over on wine from a wine sack.
No. Chaz, you're adding variables here that don't make sense. You don't know exactly what Sven's life. If Sven is the world's greatest,
piece of shit, and he was a genius.
Listen. No. Listen, come on, let me finish. If Sven is the world's greatest violinist, and he gets to play the world's greatest violin, then he's not just banging chicks. He's spending hours and hours a day practicing. I mean, let's take somebody, for example, let's take a more modern person, for example. Somebody like John Coltrane, considered to be one of the world's greatest saxophone players.
Could never build it.
He spent hours a day practicing saxophone to get...
And doing heroin. No, wait, that was Charlie Parker.
No. Listen, all jokes aside, I'm trying to answer your question. Somebody who puts who devotes their life to being the best that they can be at an instrument doesn't have time for any other things. People like Coltrane and all these other great musicians. Let's take Max, for example. You know why Max, our friend Max, by the way, for your listeners out there, you know why he's so good at what he does is because he literally spent hours a day playing guitar. He did nothing else. He just played guitar. You don't just become good after a few years. It takes a lifetime, and that's why, and without distraction. So to answer your question, these people focus on a single thing. Now, like I said earlier, it's very rare, unless you're some sort of Leonardo da Vinci, it's very rare for somebody to be able to excel at
I get that,
more than one thing in life.
I get that, dude. Keith,
Yeah.
I don't think you're really being
You're
fair.
getting me all right. George is getting upset. You're getting me all riled up.
Dude,
No,
this is a fun discussion. There's no end. There's no right answer. It's all just mystery. But I seriously do. I completely understand what you're saying, and I agree. But I don't feel you're being fair to what I'm trying to say. My little thought on the matter is that the architect has a purer intention for some reason, because than the artist who's more flagrant. And reason being, this is all I can think of because I was listening to you completely. But while you were just saying all that, this is the question that popped into my head just now. Would you consider Stradivarius just every violin he's hammering out something that may as well just be on an assembly line? Or do you think he's treating each violin like they're songs? And do you feel every song composer is firing out songs as if they're just a new violin on the assembly line, or do they matter to them? There's no right answer. I feel like the scale is further in the artifact, the maker. He has a passion to want to make this violin perfect for the player, whereas the player just goes, yeah, next.
No, see, that's where I disagree. You're assuming that an artist is flagrant, like you said earlier.
I don't give a shit. I mean, honestly, I was a guitar polisher. I made a ritual out of restringing my guitar, but I could never make one.
Yeah, but how can you assume that an artist is as flagrant as you assume that he is? What if an artist is
exaggerating a little? No, look, I'm exaggerating a little bit, but let's just to be fair, this is my point. Is every violin that a violin maker just another thing on the assembly line? And a song is just another thing that an artist fires out? Where's the connection? It trips me out. That's all I got.
Okay, all right, I got you.
All right, well, go ahead.
I'm just trying to think of a way to close this. I mean, nowadays, yeah, there's a lot of violins that are just made on an assembly line. Part of that has to do with the advancement of technology, but Stradivarius was somebody who probably just loved what he's probably somebody who not only was good at what he did, but probably really enjoyed. I don't know anything about him, but I'm going to assume that he just really enjoyed what he did as a carpenter and a builder.
It's just because it's different than a couch or anything like that, or a table, where I feel like something is lost, where us as musicians should have such more of an admiration to the maker, but we don't care. There's so many, which of course it boils down to just assembly line work. It's people that need jobs, they're popping out of work, and we just want to play what works. But where's the romance in that? There's a weird something in the middle of the thought that I just don't know. It's stimulating. Let's move on. What do you think?
Sure.
All right. Well, this was a weird episode. It's anyone's.
No, it was fun. It was actually stimulating. It's fun to think about these things.
Yeah, and I'd like to hear from any listener who would like to post in any of the comments on the pages. What's your favorite film scores? What's your favorite memories about movie soundtracks? Do you disagree or agree with anything the fuck we're saying? I don't know. Let's just jump to a couple of listener comments that I'm going to refer to from our last episode real quick. This comes from YouTube via last episode. This comes from listener Crap Cannon 86. And he says, I remember talking to Chaz throughout the Soul Ascender days on Yahoo Chat, and telling him, or him telling me pretty much the entire time, our bass player just put out an album on his own. He's talking about Ontogeny, and where he's the guitar player, and man, he shreds. I think it won't be long before he quits Soul Ascender for it. And I think this might be the last Soul Ascender album he does, and he'll probably leave. And then he says, and then he ended up being on all the rest of the albums, LOL. So yeah, that's funny. Crab Cannon right on. I don't know if that username sounds familiar to me, but it kind of does.
Now I have a question. Are you saying Crab Cannon or Crap Cannon?
Crap Cannon, as in shit.
That's better. That's good, because I thought that's better. That's good. Okay, go on.
Yeah. So honestly, all my worries are because he did actually leave the band at one point. He did quit. It was one of the darkest days of my memory because we were just getting ready for the Mechanize, local tour, and the music video happened soon after that. We were releasing the album, and I called up Nate. Like, I used to be the guy to call all the bandmates and just be like, "Hey, man, here's the ideas for this and show that." So I called Nate, and he basically just quit. He quit on the phone. He's like, "I'm just not feeling playing bass for Soul Ascender anymore." And I was like, "Oh, all right." And I hung up, and I was devastated. I was absolutely devastated. And then right after that, I messaged all the guys in the band, and Brian Kinney, less than half an hour later, messaged me back and took the opportunity to quit too. So Brian Kinney gave me the email right after Nate quit. Brian Kinney, our guitarist, said, "You know what? We're both brand new dads, a lot of shit going on." So he's like, "Look, since Nate quit, I'm going to quit." And then he probably felt like this is a good opportunity because I need to get out, and the band should just end. So that was a dark day for me. I might have actually cried, not like, but certainly some tears. But I did not quit. I recruited Sam on bass. I had to ask him a couple times. And then I messaged Nate back and said, "Hey," it's a couple of days later, or maybe like a couple of weeks later. "Hey, Nate, so I know you quit, but Brian Kinney quit. Would you like to play guitar for him?" And Nate went, "All right." So Nate rejoined because Brian Kinney quit. And we had a full lineup again, and we were together for a whole other year. So there you go.
I remember that.
So
yeah.
I was worried because Nate did quit, but we were able to get one more fucking last fucking couple miles out of this jalopy known as Soul Ascender, and we were able to finish on a good note. So pretty funny. Right on for messaging Crap Cannon. I hope you keep listening to the podcast. Hopefully this thing will get better. We need comments. We need album review recommendations from you guys. If you guys got any band you'd like for us to check out, we need topics. So let us know, and we'll definitely review them. Let's move on to the next listener comment before we wrap up, because we still have some album reviews to get to at the end of this episode. This comes from Mauricio. He's responding to last episode. Mauricio says, "Really gratifying to see Nate Venerucci really come up as a shredding guitar player. I've never had the opportunity to get into your creative process. It was pretty cool to get into the head of the Ontogeny visionary for a bit and appreciate the music more. Already a fan. It's pretty much a sure thing that even though there is so much music out there, sometimes the best kept secrets and treasures are from your very own circle of friends. Nate, kudos for keeping it real with the tunes. Loving it. Ontogeny shreds. On a side note, it was cool to hear that Driven played a small part influentially. I personally had a blast working on that album. It was gratifying to co-write with my cousin Nicholas, and along the unsurpassed talents of Brian Kinney, John Venerucci, and Chaz McConnell, we drew in a lot of influences from all over. Myself and Nick being influenced by world music, be it from Africa, Brazil, Egypt, sounds from the Middle East, with almost as if we were working in its inspirational shroud. With John bringing a thrash tip with his crunchy riffs, Brian being heavily influenced by the European metal style, which it turned to blow all our minds away, introducing groups like In Flames, Soilwork, etc. Chaz on keyboards bringing more color into the canvas with graceful touch, and it all gelled so well. Side note, I have some of the songs. I wonder who else out there has the whole album. Jim Sutton also was with us for those glorious moments. A big shout out to you, brother. I remember another thing. I remember another gig, probably Driven's first, I believe. It was at B Street Music in San Mateo. I remember some heckler before we started the show, and after they had a whole new respect. Good times. By the way, was pretty impressed to hear you, Keith Grimshaw, tried out for Animals as Leaders. I'm a huge Matt Garstka, is that how you say it?
Yeah, Garska.
Fan, and his playing style, he's talking about the current Animals as Leaders drummer, and his playing style isn't exactly your typical run-of-the-mill metal approach. Got a lot of fusion. I'm curious if by chance you have a link available to check out those audition tryout videos. Also a fan of the IDSF stuff. Really awesome to see you guys changing your musical palette here and there. Yeah, dude, Mauricio, thanks, man. Thanks for listening to our IDSF album. And you can check, I think I linked Mauricio, but anyone can check out Keith's audition video for Animals as Leaders where he almost got the gig. All you got to do is search Keith Grimshaw Thoroughly at Home.
That's
all right.
Right. Yeah.
So awesome, Mauricio. Thanks for fucking keeping in contact with us and listening to the podcast, man. Hopefully we're going to get this thing better and keep it moving. All right, here's one more quick comment from Max Anomalous, also on the YouTube video. Max responded. Max, fuck yeah, bro. We're going to get this guy on. I promise you. We're going to get this guy as a guest. So Max says, I'm incredibly honored to be mentioned on such a kick-ass episode. You guys are doing a great job, and I'm super excited for more. Keep it up. I think Nova should be talked about on an upcoming episode, not because I got to guest and do mini solos, but because the Godfather, Chaz, see, I can't control if the listeners want to call me Godfather. I can't control
Okay.
Godfather Chaz is a master composer and creates such atmosphere in his conviction with compositions. Dude, right on. Thanks. You guys are great. Nate, number one ontogeny fan here. Can't wait for the new stuff. Hats off to y'all. LOL. Yeah, the hats off. We're going to kill the hats off. Sorry I ever said it. Max, thanks for listening and responding. So, dude, you guys rock. And please, if you guys are checking out episode 4, we need some recommendations. So anyone, anywhere in our Facebook or YouTube or wherever, you can find us at Rough City Podcast on Facebook. Give us a comment. Say, hey, review this album. Something left field, something maybe you want to share with people, something personal. I don't care. Anyway, thanks, you guys. Stay tuned for episode 5. Keith, let's go ahead and get into our album reviews. Since this time we're going to go a little selfish, I wanted to have me and you make a pick.
Okay.
Start with Car Bomb. You have been meaning to talk about this. They just had a new album come out. Keith, you go ahead and start. We're going to talk about Car Bomb's new album. What's it called?
It's called Mordial. Car Bomb is a 4-piece, I would call them like a mathcore band, metal band. They have death metal influences. They're from New York, Brooklyn, New York, and they are my favorite, and I say this with 100% certainty, they are my favorite metal band out there right now. And they've been my favorite metal band for years. Ever since I've heard their second album, W Click W. And then I couldn't wait to hear their third album, which was released a couple years back. It was called Meta. And then they just released their fourth album, Mordial. And I love it. It's almost perfect for me. It hits everything that I want to hear. It's exciting. It's super unique. Um, it's really really heavy. I mean, there's just some crushing heavy death metal parts, and they have this interesting mix. They've been doing a lot of stuff on all their albums. The guy screams and he sings, and he has an interesting singing voice. He kind of reminds me of Chino from Deftones, and they've been described as having a bit of a Deftones vibe, and they do it really well. Like especially, they've sort of doubled down on that idea of mixing like this math death metal with this '90s alternative sort of Deftones vibe, and I love it. I think the album winds through these crazy, odd time signature, weird sort of crazy, just messing with time sections that are super brutal and heavy, and then they go into these beautiful, rich chord changes that are very, I don't know how to describe them except for they kind of sound like the Deftones, which is cool. And the production is amazing. It's like seriously, I don't know how they could have made an album sound better than their previous album, Meta, but they did. This is like the best sounding metal album I've ever heard, probably. The guitars are unbelievable. And that might have something to do with the fact that the bass player for Periphery actually mixed the album, and he's really good because he mixes all of Periphery's albums.
Cool.
I highly recommend the album for anybody who's really into wacky, kind of just weird time signature death metal, mathcore, and just weird progressive kind of. I don't know. It would be something for fans of like Meshuggah or the Dillinger Escape Plan, or the Deftones, or even like Cryptopsy, because they do some wild stuff. They do some stuff. I know one of the things that Car Bomb does that I love the most is that they keep you guessing. Every song is so exciting. You don't know where it's going to go. They drop into these bizarre movements where it's hard to tell where the one is, and you're swimming around in this weird sort of vortex, and all of a sudden they drop you into this really straightforward movement all of a sudden. So it's a roller coaster. It's a listening roller coaster of music, and that's what I love about them the most. And they're always on top. They're super amazingly tight band. That's pretty much it. That's my review.
Bro, you rocked that review. That there's not much I can even say after that. That pretty much describes them perfectly. But my own personal preference. I'll go ahead and talk about it. Before I all right, well, yeah. Let's get into that. So you know my taste.
Yes.
And I know you have been really pushing this band on me, and this podcast is a perfect opportunity for me to force me to finally listen to a full album of theirs. And I did. And it was good. The names that you mentioned certainly sprung to mind. I'm glad you said Dillinger before I did. Now, my own personal taste, I've never been a fan of Dillinger Escape Plan. The intensity, I get it. I can understand the appeal. The start and stop abruptness is something that I think it either grabs you or it distracts you. I'm one of those guys where it distracts me. Ion Dissonance, look, first of all, let's just say there is one and only the heaviest band in the world, and that is Meshuggah.
Yeah.
Some have got Ion Dissonance, certainly was a head turner. Cryptopsy, at one point in my life, I was like, I got to check this out. In fact, I was very into Cryptopsy for a while. I outgrew them. Personally, it just stopped being appealing to me, the chaos, the controlled chaos thing. I do get the appeal. I'm not taking this away from anyone's opinion. But the way I look at it, when you show me a Car Bomb album like this new one, I feel like I have to ask Keith, like, I need you to tell me how to listen to this. It's kind of like watching a David Lynch movie. I need you to tell me how to like this. I need you guys to tell me how to watch this Alfred Hitchcock movie that you said is so good. Can anyone help? I got my hand up like I'm in school. That's me, and it's shitty, but it's heavy, dude. It's crisp. It's very crisp. I'll say this again. I always talk in metaphors, which probably drives me crazy. I hate the sound of my own voice. Let me just say, but I gotta give this metaphor for this Car Bomb album. It was like listening, those serial killer letters that are made out of a bunch of different magazine clippings.
Yes, different fonts.
It was that in audio form.
That's funny. No, that's good. I think that's actually a good metaphor for that album. All of their albums, really, they're crazy like that. But
very crisp, super heavy. There's moments where I'm just like, oh, but of course, what I'm familiar with, Meshuggah, would just kind of keep that thing that grabbed me going around for a little while, and all the starts and stops. That's where your ion dissonance, that's where your Dillinger comes in. If you're fans of all of that, you'll love this band. This band might take the next throne of the heaviest band in the world, and that's a big tamale to say right there. So if that's what you're into, Car Bomb will not disappoint you. Also, I like some X-Toll chords thrown out here and there.
Oh yeah, I thought you might like. Yeah, I know what you're talking about. Yeah,
those specific chords that I've only ever heard from X-Toll, the band. Those guys do them. What would you call those chords? Like you know more music theory than I do.
I don't know. They play a lot of. It's like they play a lot of chords. I don't really know. I don't want to use the word atonal because they make sense in what they're doing. They're just a very emotional kind of ascending sort of chord changes.
Yeah, and the closest thing I can even say is jazz, but it doesn't sound jazzy. But I don't know, man. There's the chords they use. I've only heard it from one other band called X-Toll. Always loved it. Very dissonant sound. You guys will like Car Bomb if you like some fucking heavy controlled chaos. Car Bomb is for you. All right. Now, before we move on, I got to revert back because I said at the very beginning of the episode that I went and saw Joker tonight. Then I went into this huge rant about film scores. And my whole point I had already sort of thought about and written on a little Post-it about how there's no new film score composers that have ever done anything that stood out. Then I just so happened, before we recorded tonight's episode, to go check out the new movie Joker. Dude, what did you think of the fucking film score?
I thought it was great. I thought it was very effective, and there was a lot of moments where the film score had this very sentimental vibe to it, which was weird because it was juxtaposed next to these really bizarre, uncomfortable moments.
Right. And the suspense that built with the timpani, just boom, boom, boom. And then one violin in the mid-range that I'm like, oh, wow, right when I was about to have this conversation with Keith tonight about how film scores haven't made any sort of splash, this shit was awesome. I think the music combined with Joaquin Phoenix's performance was fantastic. But let me ask you this, Keith. You ever seen the movie Taxi Driver?
Yeah, I think I've seen it twice.
You have seen it twice because you went and saw Joker. But that's all I'll say. No more spoilers.
Oh, sure. Well, that's the thing is that just for a minute, because I just saw the movie as well. I saw it yesterday. I would like to turn this music podcast into a movie podcast for just a couple minutes.
Oh, all right. A couple minutes.
I want to say that I thought I was anticipating this movie to be good. It got rave reviews. It was even controversial under certain groups of people, just because of the way things are today in our country. But aside from that, I think that if it gets nominated for an Oscar, if it falls under that umbrella, I think that Joaquin could win Oscar for Best Actor for this movie.
He was phenomenal. It was better than I thought it was going to be. I was hoping it would be as good as the trailer at least, and it was, and better. Surprisingly better than I thought. However, as great as Joaquin Phoenix is, and I love him, his performance was amazing. We've already seen that character, and that was Travis in Taxi Driver. That aside, he was phenomenal.
Well, I like how because it was very, and it's funny because when I tell people that I saw the movie and they ask about it, I say, well, have you seen Taxi Driver? That's the movie that I compare it with.
Exactly.
But even though it's technically a DC movie and it is based on the comic book character, I will say that even though the movie does strike a very similar resemblance to Taxi Driver in the story,
But there's a lot of plays and bits. Go ahead.
yeah, I would say just the character alone. So if you think back on the famous Jokers, you got Jack Nicholson, who played Joker. He had his own thing going. It's an iconic role. And
Well,
then
he was like following you. I'm sorry, I'm following you. So just to follow your point, you're right. You're right. I see where you're going. So you had Jack Nicholson, who was we only saw him as hip, cool, collected gangster Jack Napier, and then a quick switch to maniacal Joker.
yeah.
Different. Go ahead.
And then years later, you had Heath Ledger who portrayed the Joker in a completely different way, a much more psychopathic way.
Exactly.
But also very, very entertaining, and also it was weird. It was like Heath Ledger's Joker was like a combination of a psychopath but also a psychopath that was really fun to watch. It was just it was a magnetic performance. You just wanted to watch this guy do his thing, and
Right.
and he had his own vibe. So what I appreciated a lot about this movie, besides the story, the cinematography, the soundtrack, and everything else, was that Joaquin Phoenix's Joker was his own. It was nothing like the Tim Burton Jack Nicholson Joker, and it was also nothing like Heath Ledger's Joker, and it was nothing like Jared Leto's Joker either. It was Joaquin Phoenix made his own type of Joker, which I really liked.
Yeah, it was a good origin Joker. It was the nervous wreck, no arrogance. No, let's not spoil too much, but let's just say this. The music was phenomenal, and I got to give a shout out. We were saying there's no new blood like the old cats that have stood out. Got a name drop here, and apparently the music was from this woman from Iceland. Her name is Hildur Guðnadóttir. I can't pronounce it. I can't pronounce that. Hildur, just IMDb fucking Joker. She rocked. That film score rocked.
Yeah,
And I recommend the movie, by the way. All right, let's move on to the final review before we get out of here. It's been a great episode, Keith.
Oh yeah.
I need to re-up my fucking vodka drink too. All right, so here we go. My recommendation this time, first of all, go and check out Car Bomb. Please give us a review if you do check it out. My recommendation is Cloud Kicker, the album Beacons. Now, what you will hear when you check this stuff out is all instrumental. When the songs start, you're going to be thinking, okay, what's going to happen? And then you're going to keep thinking, well, wait, is something going to happen? Well, guess what? It's happening. And you're going to start loving it. You're going to go, I get it. Okay. Whatever you're waiting for, it's already happening. And I don't know how else to explain it except it creates a mood. Explosions in the Sky is the first name that I'm going to pull out of a hat because they have that too. This guitar atmosphere mixed with drums and bass that just give you atmosphere. It's the best word for it. It's just, you're surrounded by this beautiful fucking atmosphere and nothing is going to happen. Not any vocal, not any guitar solo or shrilly guitar-y thing. Nothing is going to happen to interrupt the mood that he creates. And from start to finish, Cloud Kicker Beacons is just moving. It will move you. Honestly, the first time I ever played this album, and when it was done, I started it over again. I was like, I gotta experience that one more time. Did I just hear what I just heard? So subtle. This guy doesn't do very much. He was sort of embraced by the gent world because the rhythms are a little bit polyrhythmic and syncopated. But overall, there's no real fucking fireworks in your face like Animals as Leaders. But you could play this back to back with Animals as Leaders album, and you're going to love it. You're going to fall in love with Cloud Kicker after this album, Beacons. So I strongly recommend it for a vibe, for a mood, pleasant on your ears. Check out Cloud Kicker Beacons. What do you think?
Well, I absolutely agree. It's one of my favorite, like heavy rock, like it's one of my favorite. I would call it like a mixture of like post rock and heavy metal. It's one of my favorite albums to listen to when I'm driving, when I can zone out. It's a great album to listen to in the background if you're doing something, or if you want to just lay down, put your headphones on, close your eyes, and just listen all the way through. It's a very deep album. It's very dense. It's very dark at times, but it's also very uplifting at times. It goes through a wide range of emotions, in my opinion. The production's great. Yeah, you just end up being blanketed in this sea of notes and chords, really heavy guitar chords, and a driving drum beat. Every single song, and I noticed that on this album, each song, from beginning to end, has like there's themes that are going throughout each song, and as the song goes on, it becomes a variation of that theme. Every song, at first it sounds like the guy's just vamping on an idea, but it's variations on a main theme, which I really like. And another interesting thing about that particular album, Beacons, is that every song title on that album is actually a phrase taken from black boxes of crashed airplanes.
That's right.
These phrases were the last words the pilots ever said before their plane crashed.
That's right.
Yeah.
I don't have the track list in front of me, but that's how the tracks are actually titled. So it's a sentence. If you read down the line, it says something like, "We're going down. Oh God. I got to admit, I was afraid." Next track. "We were all afraid." All, you know what I mean? It's all in context. I'm butchering it because I don't have the track list in front of me. Dude, it's very creative.
Yeah, it's really, really, I highly recommend it for people who are really into atmospheric music and heavy music as well.
Fuck yeah. Well, excellent episode all around, dude. Keith, thanks for fucking putting up with my, I don't know, I went too deep. I don't even know what to call this episode. But I will say, everyone, thanks for listening, and please stay tuned for episode 5. Give us some recommendations. What do you want us to listen to? Because if you recommend it in the comments, either on YouTube or Facebook, me and Keith will go listen to it this week and report back next weekend.
Yes.
All right.
It was a fun episode. I enjoyed the deep combos. And
hell yeah.
I guess I'll probably see you next week.
Sounds like a plan, bro. Thanks, everybody. And that's fucking it. So, Keith, late.
Peace.